Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Lettermen Row. I am Austin Ward. That's Jeremy Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook. This is Rapid Reaction because the Buckeyes are slowly coming back to work after the national title game, and Ryan Day spoke with the media on Friday to update some of this busy offseason mixed with vacation that they've gone through over the last week and a half or so. And the biggest move now for the coaching staff at this point is that Greg Mattison, after 41 years in the coaching profession and 2 seasons at Ohio State, the co-defensive coordinator has elected to retire. This is a move that has been expected for quite some time. In fact, if the Buckeyes had maybe won the national championship a year ago, this might have happened then. He was always meant to come in and lend some of that veteran expertise and experience, mentor the coaching staff as Ryan Day took over. And he did that. Two productive years with the Buckeyes. Maybe not the pass defense overall that Ohio State would have wanted last season, but that front seven was dominant. Greg Mattison wrapping up a productive, long-time, storied career. And it opens up a position now for Ryan Day as he continues to mold this program in his image heading into year 3.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what this offseason is about. Ultimately, for me, it's about Ryan Day turning it into his program and not just taking it to be a continuation of Urban Meyer's. And Greg Mattison, despite the fact that he came from Michigan, was an Urban Meyer assistant previously, and that sort of, I think, guided that connection. But Greg's role was obviously not entirely understood, I think, by people on the outside. His opportunity at Ohio State was about being a game planner, was about helping get Al Washington, Kerry Combs, giving him some assistance. It really wasn't about being, the rah-rah, go out and recruit all the time, be that sort of stuff, because when you have a bunch of young coaches and a head coach that's 40 years old, they're able to do that. And you can let a guy like Mattison be the mentor, as you said, and mission accomplished for him, and, wish him well in retirement.
Yeah. And that also shouldn't mean to diminish the work that he did. Ryan Day specifically talked about, and Justin Hilliard has on numerous occasions, the work that he did with the specific, linebackers that Greg Mattison worked with. They loved the guy. Obviously, his knowledge for the game, you could talk to him about anything. He's been through all the wars and seen every kind of defense that could ever be played. Now, as Ohio State moves forward, this isn't likely the kind of role that, that you're not going to find another guy like Greg Mattison. And Berm, you know this better than anybody, that you probably are going to want someone who is younger and more involved in the recruiting process. But again, that was not what Greg Mattison was meant to do over the last 2 seasons. If that had been a priority for Ryan Day, then he wouldn't have brought him over from Michigan in the first place. But certainly those linebackers, I think, will miss him, and that's where you sort of look as Ohio State moves forward, Spencer.
Yeah, I think Greg Mattison served a perfect role for a young coaching staff where all of these guys, a lot of them were really young. And for Greg Mattison to be able to show them, his experience and those kind of things for 2 years and say, like, okay, now it's yours. I'm going to step away. I taught you some stuff. And not that he was like the only mentor in the room, but he did teach. I'm sure he did teach him some things. And I think he served a great role. And now you go out and get somebody young, energetic, and willing to, fight for recruits and those kind of things. I think that the perfect guy for the job when Ryan Day first took over was Greg Mattison. Now Ryan Day gets to go out and find somebody that fits what the defense wants to do more than just game planning.
Yeah, and we don't know how exactly this will work out. I mean, certainly Ohio State's known that this was a possibility and in the works for a while. We talked about it, Berm, the day after the title game, that this was a possibility and that Greg Mattison was likely heading towards retirement. So certainly Ryan Day will have already had a short list that he's operating off of. You and I are going to continue, all of us at Lettermen Row are going to continue to work on this. I expect it should be wrapped up in about a week or so, maybe less. Some of the names that have popped up, maybe Randall Joyner, who spent time with Ohio State and is at SMU now. Ryan Crow, somebody who's familiar with Ohio State as well and has also worked with Kerry Combs with the Tennessee Titans. Those are the first 2 that come to mind for me. Since I've been asked numerous times about it already. LSU assistant Corey Raymond, who's come up seemingly every single year that there's been an opening, I'm told he will not be a candidate for this position. Obviously, things are always subject to change, but he is not someone that Ohio State has actually pursued in the past, and I don't expect that they will over the next couple of days.
I think it's just one of these things. It's a fascinating dynamic between what Ohio State's trying to do and what if you look at Alabama, they're replacing, 14 different staff members, and they go out and get Bill O'Brien. They go out and get Doug Marrone. Clearly their aim is different. Ryan Day does not have the Rolodex that Nick Saban does. So that's something to obviously consider in the coaching world. But the opportunity to coach at Ohio State is something that a lot of people would love to have. And at a place like Ohio State, depending on how much money the Buckeyes are willing to go after an assistant coach here with, there's nobody that's really off the table for Ohio State amongst anyone out there that's an available coach, and even ones that are working elsewhere. I personally, it's probably a pipe dream, but I thought that Kevin Steele, the guy that went from Auburn to now Tennessee, who will probably end up being available, to me, that's a guy I would personally target. But again, this is like the Malik Willis thing. Just me personally, but I don't think that that's really in the cards. But there's a lot of good, experienced, and also good young coaches that are out there that would love to work with Ryan Day and what Ohio State has. So it's going to wrap up quickly, but a lot of it depends on what Ryan Day said today. How do they maneuver the current staff around? Does Al Washington change his responsibility? Does Matt Barnes change his responsibility, et cetera? And Matt Barnes is another guy in the Greg Mattison mold almost that people haven't really heard much about, but he's done a really good job for Ohio State and become one of the Buckeyes' ace recruiters. So you wouldn't be surprised if he got an opportunity to get elevated a little bit.
Yeah, I think there will probably be some movement with Matt Barnes more so than Al Washington. We'll see exactly how that plays out over the coming days. And Greg Mattison, to your other point, Berm, was extremely well compensated. He had earned that. If you've got $1 million+ to work with here, there's no real limitation for Ohio State. It is funny to compare and contrast that situation with Alabama. Those were, two obvious fits to the former NFL coaches who had those backgrounds and they could plug right in. I'm not sure that really exists, for Ohio State with defensive coaches from that NFL level that are suddenly available on the market. But even if they were, they just made that move last year with Kerry Combs to take him from that level and make him the coordinator. Clearly they're not giving up on that after 8 games in a bizarre pandemic shortened year and no spring ball and all that stuff. I mean, that's not going to be in the cards here to pack it in after Kerry Combs, really, because of, one game. If you want to lump what Clemson's passing attack in that one, you can. I mean, they finished number 122 in the country. That's never going to sit well for Ohio State. But Kerry Combs was also part of that overall effort that had one of the best rush defenses in America and won the Big Ten and won the Sugar Bowl. So that's not, Ryan Day and Kerry Combs see eye to eye. And I think that a little bit of fresh blood may help here, but it's not going to be to undercut the hire that they just made 12 months ago.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic in the coaching room because, Ryan obviously has, some love for Kerry Combs, and I think that the love is reciprocated. And I think that they really do work well together. I think if you give Kerry Combs a full offseason and a full season, that defense probably looks a lot better. People talk about talent, but I think that if you give him an offseason, it would look a little better. But I think that, some fresh ideas, a fresh mind. I'm seeing a lot of coaches go from the NFL to college. So there's always, some wild cards that you don't really know about that could pop up. Maybe, I don't know, but it's going to be interesting. I think this is a huge offseason for Ryan Day on the defensive side, whereas last year with first year quarterback coach, Corey Dennis, I think it was a big year for the offense last year. I think this is a huge offseason for the defense when you're putting together a staff and getting new guys in there and seeing what you have to replace. I think this is going to be a big offseason.
I think you've seen, like with Alabama, and I don't mean to go back to them, but the assistant coaching world, it gets a lot of run. It gets a lot of conversation going, and people go, if this coach leaves, what happens to this player, this recruit, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. The fact is you have to find a guy that fits your system, that recruits hard, that is going to help you be a good team, a better team for that 1 year or 2 years that he's in your program. I'm a firm believer that assistant coaches who are staying in one spot for longer than 3-4 years generally, are either aren't happy or are content with not moving on to another job, like not elevating their career. Like Larry Johnson, he's a defensive line coach. He loves what he does. He's an associate head coach. I don't know that he wants to be anything beyond that. But when you're talking about younger guys, you have to be willing to take a risk on a guy that might leave in a year or two if he's going to help elevate your program.
Like a Jeff Hafley, perhaps.
Right, exactly.
And those
is he available?
He's not available. The point is those are few and far between. And also it's a reminder that, when Ryan Day was first going through this 2 years ago, and we're, making these lists and talking about the people that, there might be conversation with, I never mentioned Jeff Hafley. I had never heard of him. And that could be maybe a useful reminder heading into this next week, both for us and for anybody who might be evaluating that hire in a week's time. Like, Ryan Day does know more people, even if he doesn't have Nick Saban's Rolodex. He's been in this profession long enough that he spent a lot of time at multiple levels, and he knows who can coach and who can't coach. He nailed the Jeff Hafley move.
You know who else no one had ever heard of when he was hired? Ryan Day.
Yeah.
Right. So
I got that one right. Yes. Yeah. And we're like, so that's the thing. When we're sitting there like 5 things to know about Ryan Day and Jeff Hafley, I couldn't even get to 5. Really, I had to just dig through the bios because they were not people that were on the radar. And often
you were like last name is opposite of night.
And people just ate that up. Thank you for that information, Austin. We love you. But that's the point. Usually, if Urban Meyer or Ryan Day calls you up and hires you, there's a good reason for that.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with the guys they hire. I think they know more about football than we do. And, that's just being honest. I think,
True.
When Ryan Day hired Jeff Hafley, he obviously knew that Jeff Hafley was a pretty darn good football coach. And I think when Urban Meyer hired Ryan Day, he knew something that a lot of us didn't. So I think Ryan Day, even in just year 3 as a head coach, has earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to these hiring processes. I think, he does his homework. He knows what he's doing. He knows who's good and who's not. And, like you said, maybe he'll pull a rabbit out of his hat and come up with a defensive assistant from somewhere we've never heard of. So you never know. The coaching silly season is weird.
The worst part of Ryan Day hiring Jeff Hafley is that the only photo we could find of Jeff Hafley was him making some really weird face in a media scrum outside of the 49ers facility from years ago. And I felt bad because every time we wrote a story about the guy, it was one picture and he looked like he was struggling to speak.
Even the 49ers didn't have like a ton of information on Jeff Hafley. I emailed them to ask, do you have any other pictures? This is all we can find. Because we had to use it for like 2 straight months. Like he was a real mystery to a lot of people at both levels, except for those he had worked with. Tyvis Powell had worked with him. Richard Sherman talked about how great he was. Everyone who knew him raved about him. And then he was just this great mystery. Then 1 year later, he's the coach of Boston College. We'll see if that's the career track for the next guy that Ohio State hires. That process is well underway now as Greg Mattison has retired. Wish him well heading in to that. Best of health, best of good luck. After 41 years on the coaching sidelines, Greg Mattison now done. That's Birmingham and Spencer Holbrook. This has been Rapid Reaction brought to you by Byers Auto. I am Austin Ward. Stay with us for full coverage of the Ohio State Buckeyes at lettermenrow.com.